make sure things are in the right position. ADB, voting government.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
ADB, or ADB. ADB, yes. Sebastian is prime minister. IIUD, opening up. Harris first. Yes. A goes with K or the and CFSA, country or charity. Charity. So this one is you. So you are going first. Okay, maybe can I, on the motion result to impose a main privilege tax, can I invite the Prime Minister to do so?
Men have for far too long been enjoying financial benefits which women have been unable to access or unable to gain because of men themselves. We think that, coming from opening government, we think that women are entitled to compensation from men themselves, because we think that only in this way, social justice in some form, especially financial form, will be achieved. Because the redistribution of income from men to women means that what we are doing is men and women will operate on a more level playing field in the future. That's what we aim to achieve by this mechanism. And our mechanism will be two-point mechanism, right? Firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to tax all employed men. We're going to tax all employed men based on the income that they earn. This means that additional income tax. This means that men who earn more income in general will pay more privilege tax. We'll redistribute and allocate these funds into programs which generally support women and the development of women as a whole, such as women development programs, microfinancing for women to help women entrepreneurs have a seat, to help them regain the financial benefit that they were previously unable to achieve and obtain because of men. We also think we also subsidize other areas where women were previously disadvantaged, such as childbirth is one of them. We're going to subsidize childbirth, and we also subsidize education for women in conservative societies. All this is done with the intention of elevating the status of women up to where men are right now. First argument, principal justification. Why do we tax people? Sit down. We tax people. We currently status quo. We redistribute the income from rich people to poor based on the level of one's ability to pay. What does this mean? This means that currently what we do is we tax the rich so that we can compensate for the disadvantage that the poor suffers. In this case, it's even more justified, because now what we do is we think that men are causing the decline, the reason why women are not able to elevate themselves in the first place. It is even more justified because of that reason. That is why, Mr. Speaker, progressive income tax cut. That is why currently progressive income tax is being used to redistribute income. Because to neutralize the playing field, to remove social injustice, because the money from that ends up going to programs like welfare, programs like benefits, loans, also microfinancing to help the poor in the first place to get out of the situation they're in, and to ensure that social justice is either mitigated, and in the long term, the playing field is that will sit out all of you. But also, we tell you, why is progressive income tax based on percentage? Because we acknowledge, right? We think that basically we acknowledge that the rich people are capable of paying such tax in the first place. That's why we tax them more, because we know that they can afford it. All right. Secondly, why is this a social injustice, Mr. Speaker? Why is tax? Why are women entitled to tax benefits, but why are men entitled to discrimination? Because we think, firstly, Mr. Speaker, due to the birth laws, we think that no one has a choice of gender. This means that out of all the children born, there is a pretty much 50% chance that you will be born a woman, and there's nothing you can do about it. No one opted to be a man or a woman in that sense. Due to that, first level analysis, but we think that based on this, we think that the constant subjugation of women occurs in status quo. How does this happen? We think it happens in many ways, but most prominently for this debate, because it's a very financial debate, we think this happens mostly on the workplace. The facts maintains, Mr. Speaker, that in the United States of America, women generally earn 20% less per hour that men, and this is just a general estimate. There's no way to ascertain the actual benefit when it comes to like huge corporate ladders like CEOs pay. We think the gap disparity is even worse under that paradigm. Sit down. We think that this places women at a clear financial disadvantage because it's very obvious. Like if women are earning less than men, despite putting the same effort, having the same level of qualification, we think that the financial reward and everyone that they seek that they gain out of the job that they do is the same. We think this financial disadvantage needs to be nullified. This is and this is because what do we tell you? Sit down. We think this assumes that women are in the same position as men to begin with. Most often, we think that women are not in the same position at all because they don't get to move up the corporate ladder. Firstly, we need to establish that we know when do we say that someone's on the same level, right? Because we know that women are equally capable, assuming that all other factors are the same. Syphilis paradigm, assuming all other like the level of qualifications the same. We assume that two people have the same qualification and they're only discriminated because of their gender. Based on that, Mr. Speaker, we tell you that the glass ceiling that is in place in most corporate settings today results in gender discrimination, and this is a financial disincentive to women, and that is why furthermore, that is why these women deserve the financial compensation. Sit down. 14% currently, Mr. Speaker, even in high levels of employment, 14% of American CEOs, only 14 are women. This just shows how bad the glass ceiling is in status quo. This just shows the level of the problem, the severity of the problem that we need to address right now. The conclusion to this level analysis is, Mr. Speaker, male privilege exists. That is why it's justified to tax them for it. Because the successes that men achieve in life have been due to the fact that they are male. Because they always have had an advantage. They always will have an advantage unless we do something about it. This means the access to benefits that you have, the career progression that you enjoy today, and even more than the education, the level of education that you enjoy, they've been able to achieve in the first place, get them to these high careers. This has all been due to the fact that they are male and they need to compensate women for that. But before I go on, yes.
Would you tax gay people? Would you tax straight people where gay discrimination happens?
No, we wouldn't, because we tell you that this is totally different. We think this is a clear gender discrimination problem because in this case, men are clearly putting women at disadvantage due to that capability, due to the fact, or take one, due to the fact that men are putting women at disadvantage. We think it's only right to redistribute and reallocate the income equally. That's not the case under the POI. Okay, the example of this is because it's inheritance tax. By being more privileged, why are you going to pay more tax? We tell you the success is caused by the privilege, so it is justified hence to be distributed to the poor. But also, even if scenario, Mr. Speaker, even if men are not highly employed and women is higher, this is where we come up with the even if scenario, right? Even sometimes we tell you men sometimes deserve the position that they're in. Sometimes women generally do deserve to be higher. But why do we still tax men in this scenario, Mr. Speaker? We think that the development in life that men enjoy to reach the position they are in, even though it is lower, is due to the fact that they are men to begin with. Because women suffer from many kinds of discrimination, which results in a host of harms, like day-to-day discrimination that affects their mental state. For example, sexual harassment, name calling, simple discrimination that women face affect their mentality, affect their motivation, and hence eventually affect their career progress. That is why it is justified. But okay, Mr. Speaker, finally, what are the benefits? What are the general benefits we can get from this policy? We think when men are, in this case, put at disadvantage, when they have previously enjoyed such an advantage to begin with, women get elevated in life. Women get elevated socially. We think and now women are able to. And finally, the problem, the stigma, the social discrimination that occurs in society is corrected. Since you can finance them more, Mr. Speaker, even though we concede it may not necessarily be enough to put them to elevate that at the same level, that may take time. But it's a start, Mr. Speaker, and we need to utilize the benefit that men enjoy and redistribute this benefit to benefit women. For all those reasons, we're very, very proud to propose this motion.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for this debate.
On side opening of the issue, we acknowledge that there is a problem of inequality. We know that women are being discriminated. We know there's a problem of sexual harassment at workplace. We know there's a problem of income disparity. But that kind of problem is not something that people eventually close one eye to. Those are the problems that based on social progression that happen in status quo, we are making a change. It's something that even men do acknowledge is something which is not right. And those changes are already coming. And even if it's slow, this is something that we will still fight for, which is something beneficial. What we do not agree is helping women with this form of method. But we do not think that punishing men because of the things that happened before and progression that's already happening is something that will eventually make things better in the future. But the problem is that they are basing on improving women, and the idea of improving women, they're depending on men's privilege to remain there. Because if men's privilege aren't really there, they wouldn't get the form of income. They wouldn't get that form of benefit. Those are a benefit which is not sustainable and form of benefit that we don't believe something which is beneficial. We believe other form of benefit will eventually work. We all explain later on in the segment. But let's look at one of the first things that they mentioned. They mentioned that they want to tax working men, and we also acknowledge that there are a lot of men which are also not working. Hence, the problem is, it's not for us to focus, just take money away from men and straight away like build up women. We believe it's something that we can also do, but it's a problem that a lot of it is being shared to men and also women, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that this form of that see the scope, the idea of income tax and such should be then distributed to men and women to improve everyone. This is one of the best ways to do so, and not isolate one gender. Most of my remarks will be right. Now, first thing that we need to clarify is that the purpose of tax and how this form of tax will not fit into context. What we need to understand is very simple, right? The purpose of taxation is that you tax someone based on a clear and objective standard. An objective standard on the success that happens, and the form of success is them working, and the amount of property that they have gained, right? How is more quantifiable success? Property, income tax, or even sin tax if they have capability of buying products and such. But the problem is, as I mentioned this now, is that these are the tax you give to individuals just because you are a man, and not really just based on the success that you already have, which already exists in normal income tax. So this is when we believe, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of individuals also who are not deserving to pay this form of tax. Even though you're working, doesn't mean you're successful. If you're working if you have a job which pays you quite low, but you're barely surviving on the income that you have, why is it that your responsibility to cough up more and more money because you already have income tax, then you have a double form of tax that you have other individuals? We believe this form of tax is something that is unable to be quantified, unable to be quantified, and this is something which is unfair, ladies and this is not something they will be really for, right? So the second level, what we need to look at is very simple for right? Because he tried to tell us that you'll talk about the idea of birth lottery. How it's unfair for women because there's a 50-50% chance that you marry a woman, and once you become women, it's already unfair because they have to go through a lot of things. But essentially, we acknowledge that. That's why we already have a lot of programs which exist in status quo to build up women's movement. The encouragement of quota and such, which is already in existence, right? Birth lottery idea that can already be helped and be compensated. But the problem that we have right now is that the birth lottery that we have in our case is much worse. Because you're imposing tax just because the individuals are male. And the problem is that we can't even measure the impact this form of tax will have. And they also can't determine whether or not they can run away from tax or not being taxed at all. Because essentially if you have income tax, they can only determine it because on the capability that they have, the salary they have, so they can even opt out for having certain form of tax by not necessarily buying products that will have same tax and such. But in this form of case, there is no form of opt-out. This is a direct form of punishment towards individuals who just because they are male. This is a form of discrimination that rules are agreed. What if these are the individuals, for example, like men? Because there's a lot of men out there who are also supporting the cause of feminist movement and also power of female. So, like, if he's already copying up or you can help bring your part in helping women, but you're also punishing him just because you're a man, you are supposed to be forced to help women, and this form of method, something that we do not agree with. That's why we give you already a form of UI, right? Just for example, because individuals who are gay are also being discriminated and put disadvantaged in comparison to privileged straight individuals. So by matter of acting homosexual, will you then impose that form of tax towards people who are straight just because you want to help? We don't think this form of method is something which is just this form of birth lottery is an idea that you shouldn't justify tax because of birth lottery. Right? But before I go on, closing.
Pre-existing policies that you support on your side, things like affirmative action, things like quota and microcredit actively excludes men as well. What is the exclusive, dislike of your side to this particular policy?
Because the difference is very simple. Because you're excluding a form of benefit, all right, but you don't necessarily punish one of the individual. Because if you don't get money, you don't get money. But at the very same time, these men, when they have money, their money are being deducted and being punished, and you're blaming men. Furthermore, this is the idea that we essentially don't want. Hence, the problem is later on, right? This next idea is about endorsement and acknowledgement. As I mentioned before, your proposal hinges upon individuals and men still being privileged, because when they are privileged, it's all money that you can justify that form of tax, so that tax can be used, right? So you're essentially endorsing the idea that men are privileged, men are the one discriminating women. And the problem later on is that this form of tax is something that men especially wouldn't really agree upon, saying that they are being taxed unnecessarily. But assuming that they are forced to cough up tax anyway, we feel the problem that we have, this is when they will say that, okay, I've paid your form of tax, your male privilege tax, and that's all I'm going to do, because those are supposedly the tax that benefit all women. We believe this is not something that we want, especially with the need of people she campaign by Emma Watson, saying that for you to help women is also to say that men are a part of the problem too. Men are also at some point of time are treated unequally, so this is a problem that men should also get involved and not only support financially in terms of a form of punishment in this event, and that wouldn't really be beneficial for men. So you wouldn't get that much support anyway. So even if you're able to have some form of program, that program will still not change the perception of how men view women. In fact, men will also view women more, because you're putting not only a blame towards men, but also a direct punishment when you tax men, ladies, and gentlemen. And we do not think that this is the best way to do so. So even if there are problems, we think that problems can already be solved with the measure that we have raised in the school. With that, we're very powerful.
Thank you, leader of opposition, and I invite leader to stand.
Mr. Speaker, the way a lottery works is that there are winners and there are losers. We think it's utterly shameful for side opposition to come here and tell us that men are also losers in this lottery, Mr. Speaker. Because what they do is that given the disadvantage of women, and the only people they can compete against are women, they are the winners of this lottery. Given the features of their sexuality, Mr. Speaker, the one that gives them the ability to make career progressions at the cost of women itself. We don't think they're the losers in these situations. They're winners, and we can tax winners. Just the same way how we tax how we have inherited tax for individuals who are privileged, who come from privileged families, just because of that privilege alone, and we need to equalize that income to other individuals in the society. Right now, I have two questions in this debate. Number one, should we tax men? And secondly, does this help women? Because this is generally the contentions that side of the opposition had, but we really don't know their direction. Because the only case in this debate is like, but we already have other things to help women. The only response we have is, why can't we have more things to help women, Mr. Speaker? That isn't necessarily a bad thing. They need to tell us why this harms women, or this is harmful towards men. But let's deal with these two issues. Sorry, before that issue, let me just quickly answer this question. Would we tax gay people? The reason why we don't tax gay people, the reason why we don't tax straight people because gay people are disadvantaged, Mr. Speaker, is because when you go to work, your employer doesn't look at you and know you are gay. You have to tell him that you are gay. The problem with gender and forced discrimination is that even before they ask you a question, Mr. Speaker, knowing you are a woman, that's where the discrimination comes in. That's why it's a lot more worse. But if indeed that there is a large social movement towards male LGBT communities coming out in employment, Mr. Speaker, we're more than happy to have this policy if it's more discriminatory towards them as well. We don't think that there can be a limitation. We're debating this motion right now, right? But firstly, should we tax men? Because what they asked us was, well, we should tax everyone instead and give the money to everyone. But we already do that, Mr. Speaker. That's called income tax. They had no response whatsoever when they said it's going to be integrated in their speech to why we can't solve the current injustice towards women directly. The reason why it has to be a tax, Mr. Speaker, is because the career progression of men, more often than not, is due to the fact that women in the workforce are disadvantaged. That's why they get a comparative advantage, Mr. Speaker. That's why we think in those situations it's a tax that's a necessity, right? That's why in the UK we have inheritance tax to individuals who come from rich families, because states recognize that it's unfair for you to just immediately get money out of privilege from being rich, for example. The same context applies. You are privileged as a man and you get money from it. That's the same way why we can tax the men for that, right? So we think in this situation, it's perfectly justified to tax men specifically and give the money to women to help women. But they also told they also told us in response, well, some men have low positions and some women have higher positions in that workspace, and at the same time also some men support the feminist movement. We've already answered this question in our first speech, Mr. Speaker. The reason why we still will tax these privileged men is because there's always implicit privileges that they get, Mr. Speaker. Some things that are not as explicit as the 84%, 86% CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, or the fact that they earn at least 20 cents higher than any other women within the United States workforce, Mr. Speaker, on an hourly basis. These are all explicit circumstances where there is discrimination. But implicitly, women go through day-to-day things like sexual harassment, like name calling, like discrimination based on their sexual features alone, that causes mental traumatic effects on them that directly affects their career progression. So if you think about it, Mr. Speaker, given the fact that they face a lot more in society, given that society is patriarchal in nature, there is a specific advantage towards men regardless of their position in society. We think that they are still less traumatized by society than women are. We think in these situations, they do have a specific advantage, right? Given that education is the same, given that they have the same ability to gain that access. We think it's perfectly fair to tax these men as well, especially since we don't tax them as much because they are in a lower position and they don't earn as much as the speaker. That's why we think it's perfectly proportional. I'll take closing.
Now, tell me how by taxing male would then increase the rate of CEOs, would then increase the number of pays women get, again, decrease the traumatization.
So this is how it goes. We are not going to tell you that the rate of CEOs in the country is going to go to 50% men and 50% women. That's impossible for us to tell you. But what we can tell you that is that it will improve, Mr. Speaker. On a comparison of paradigms, our paradigm is probably going to be more effective in improving the position level of women. Because what do subsidies do? You give microfinancing to women, for example, the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which allows young women entrepreneurs to take small loans and start up businesses, Mr. Speaker, that allow them to move further up in life. You give job training to women, education to women through subsidies that allows them to make more, get better skills in life that makes them gives them an undeniable reason to move up that corporate ladder. These are things that directly help women. Maybe it won't be 14% anymore. Maybe we're looking at 30%. But in the future, Mr. Speaker, this is an improvement. And we think it can go much higher, right? But this is an improvement comparison to the other side. So the next question we need to ask is that does this help women? This is where their positive materials debate come in. Because they told us that this will endorse male privilege, and secondly, that men will start hating women more. Let me tell you through both of this why this doesn't make sense at all, right? The reason why this doesn't endorse male privilege, Mr. Speaker, is because this isn't an affirmative action policy. That's an affirmative action argument. Affirmative action gives out the fact that women are disadvantaged and need help. What this does is taxes men for being advantaged instead. That sends a completely different message that you don't deserve the amount, that not necessarily you don't deserve the amount, you don't deserve the amount of money you're getting right now because of the comparative advantage you had over another woman, right? It's a negative effect to men. It doesn't endorse the idea that you have male privilege, it highlights the idea that you have male privilege, Mr. Speaker. But on the idea that men will start hating women more, right? Because we don't think this is true. Because at the end of the day, they like girls and they want to get married and they want to get a wife. That doesn't mean they will start hating women more and there'll be a large civil war against men and women. This doesn't make sense, Mr. Speaker. Because more often than not, people will realize that through this policy and what we intend to achieve is that men will start realizing that, look, my position is unfair in the first place, right? My position in society is due to the fact that women are disadvantaged, and if my money can go to women as well, we don't think that this is a reason for them to hate each other. By that logic, Mr. Speaker, they tell us that rich people have to hate poor people just because that their money is going to poor people, which is not necessarily true at all, right? At the end of the day, we have to understand that women are disadvantaged, and we are doing something about it for the better. So our opposition needs to tell us how that is a bad thing. For all those reasons, very proud to propose.
Can you just Prime Minister to close for the opening up and invite the chair?
position stance is very clear. We acknowledge the privileges that some men have in society. But we don't think the solution to it is by punishing those individuals and by saying that you are privileged in the society. Because we think the problem is not that we don't have much money to channel to the women. We think the problem is the mentality and the stigma of those individuals. And we think this is a problem solution mismatch. We don't think we think status quo is in a way working fine, but even if we need some money, we are willing to channel other sources to get those money from other sources of income, of other sources of money, but not necessarily punishing these people. We think that's definitely regressive and we are not going to accept it. This is very unjust law because it targets individuals regardless of whether they are enjoying those privileges or not. For instance, a female getting 10,000 to 1,000 ringgit and a male and female getting the same income, that policy targets those males regardless of whether they might discriminate these female. They can't definitely quantify the amount of harm, the amount of harm that these males are kind of infringing upon women. Therefore, it's extremely difficult for them to proportionally, maybe disproportionately tax these individuals. I have two substantive matters. First, I'll tell you on how it definitely empowers the chauvinists and empowers the chauvinist mentality and psyche. Second, I'll tell you on how this brings genders to life and definitely is a regressive for the feminism. But let's look at only few things that they have. They want to tell you the males are the cause of the disadvantaged women. We don't think that's necessarily true in all instances. We think there are individuals in the society who are very, very willing to help the feminist movement, right? Who are very, very willing not to discriminate and willing to help these humans. But we acknowledge there are certain individuals who might discriminate as well. Like we have individuals in all the society, in many societies, right? We do have those individuals. But we don't think that exactly by punishing these individuals and telling them you have to give more money directly help women. We don't think that's the case. We think that doesn't help women unnecessarily. Even if you punish those individuals, I'll tell you later on why this is definitely wrong. They want to tell you this idea of taxing is not like we endorse the idea that males are privileged, but we highlight it. We just highlighted that's male privilege, male domination. We think the highlighting and exactly the endorsing are the same thing in the mindset of those individuals who are chauvinists. Once you say to them, I'm punishing you because you are a male, that means they are going further to discriminate. That means they will further that endorses the idea of them being privileged by the society. More discrimination can happen. First argument on how this empowers the chauvinists and how this unfolds the idea that I'm a male, I have to discriminate. This policy is unfair to the liberal people who are willing to help the feminist movement, people who are willing to not to discriminate the females, right? Because these individuals have not caused any harm to anyone. Why? And they have to demand why should we tax those individuals. So we think it's definitely disproportional harm and disproportional tax in those individuals. But this policy, has a direct effect on the people, on chauvinists, on people who are willing to discriminate, the direct effect on those mindsets. Why? Because we think there are two possible outcomes from this test. There are two possible reactions. Firstly, the males, like those individuals, say now from this policy, they might take pride of their gender, right? They think I'm a male, therefore I am superior to a female, that's why I'm being taxed. That means that they further on will be taking pride and will be acknowledging the differences in the gender that they have to the female. That means the discrimination and the harm that they're going to, and the dominating psyche that is going to involve individuals will be higher, and that will never be evolving in the future. That means that endorses the idea of me being male. I take pride on that. But secondly, it's very likely for this individual to be pissed off and say, I'm being punished unnecessarily because I'm earning a certain amount of money, right? I'm taxed in income tax. I'm taxed in many ways. The additional tax for me just because I'm male is unjust and is not necessarily that's not good for me, right? This means that these individuals, besides having the mindset that I'm a male, I'm superior, now will be pissed off because they acknowledge they are being punished because they are males. We think that's definitely wrong because the consequence to this might be more discrimination. The consequence to this might be more stigma on women and more pride taking in their being just male. Opening.
So even if your endorsement towards men happens, that's intangible. comparatively, tangibly, we have more money for women to spend. So why is that an advantage even if
No, we think that that money that you are going to get, you can get even from other sources, right? You can get from other income taxes that you might charge. We don't think it's the problem with us getting money for the females, right? But secondly, the harm that is going to be accrued on males, on those individuals, is definitely tangible. That will lead eventually to tangible harm that is going to be put in women. We think further discrimination can happen. Second argument on how this brings gender to life. We are fighting for a society in which gender does not play a big role. We are fighting for a society where you are taxed or where you are hired or based on merit, right? We think that society is our goal and feminist goal. But the government is doing in this case, is basically bringing that gender to life, saying to the individuals, we acknowledge you being male, we acknowledge you being privileged, and we acknowledge female. So you are definitely in privilege. So basically that brings the gender to life. That means this means that as I told you, right? This brings the gender identity into life. That this means that those individuals who might be likely maybe to support the feminist idea, who might be likely to support the females, will be won't be willing to support these ideas. Why? Because they will think, I'm a male, maybe I shouldn't support it. That means further, less support for the feminist ideas, for the feminist movements will be there. But second thing might be I'm free from liability, as Harry told you, right? I'm free from liability because eventually I have done everything that I'm supposed to do, right? I have already faced a certain amount of tax. That's why I have already paid a certain amount of tax. Therefore, I don't have any liability to support women, maybe to go on campaigns, maybe to talk good, maybe about even to talk good about feminist movements. We think definitely is regressive, and we think that definitely is discriminatory to the individuals who are definitely not causing tangible harm to the family. Even if you want to tax those individuals who might be chauvinist, we think it's regressive because that means that pisses them off and makes them take pride on them being privileged. They are very proud of it.
And the Deputy Opposition. As spoken for the closing half, and I invite the member of the
In creating a world of equality, it's about resurrecting balance. And we think that in this particular scenario, it's an economic power play that we have had to struggle with for the longest time, Mr. Speaker. Personally, we know how that feels like. It's not so much that women can't participate in the general world necessarily, but it's also the fact that they are never included because the privilege that is afforded to all men. We think that it's time that the state starts taking a solid stance in the way that we recorrect this balance. What is the burden in imposing government? We think A, we're going to prove why it's principally okay to tax men because we're going to show you why that male privilege existed to begin with, and B, why taxing men, we will be able to re-educate and re-correcting that balance within society. Before I move on to my extension, 2 questions in opening opposition. Number 1, is it a fair collective punishment? Because that's the only contention that came from that case, right? That this is a punishment to all men. We agree, but we don't understand where opposition is going in this debate, Mr. Speaker. Because if that's the only argument that you can stand on today, then you're principally against any form of taxation whatsoever as a form of punishment, Mr. Speaker. We don't think so. We think that in a particular scenario, no, thank you, but we want to re-correct balance in society. We think it's very fair for states to want to impose punishment, things like progressive taxation to help creating welfare states. But B, and this is where my point of information came in, right? We did not see a principal opposition. Because they told you can have other policies. The distinction was you don't take anything away from men. We disagree. If you have a quota, you're taking jobs away from men. If you have affirmative actions like microcredits, you're taking away loans from women. That means effectively opening opposition has no place in this debate, right? But secondly, do men deserve to be punished? Obviously, opposing government will not say all men are douchebags because we respect that some men are very good, Dr. Chandra. It's not about how you treat women. Right? That's not a debate. The debate isn't how you treat women. is the fact that individuals of the male community were fundamentally advantaged at the expense of women, and we want to create that balance. And we think that this is how we create. No, thank you. Some people are nice, and we understand, but we don't offer selection bias in terms of when we allow for taxation to exist. People who are empathetic to the poor and go to the soup kitchens still get taxed at the end of the day, because we recognize that all of society has to play a role. People who would like to enjoy a scotch every once in a while and feel bad for alcoholics still get sin tax at the end of the day. But thank you. We don't think that empowers chauvinists, because under your model, you still make them angry at the end of the day, right? But the premise that equality targets is that we understand that not all men within society will be able to change and accept this, but at the very least, we think that a large majority will be able to change. We think that we will correct the balance. Before I move on, we think that we want to give a lot of credit to, we give kudos to opening government, the way in which they set up debate, replication, and distribution, and all those things. But the difference between opening government and closing government, Mr. Speaker, is that they treat the symptoms, we cure the cause, and we need to start re-educating the way in which individuals perceive this particular problem. Before I move on,
would you then impose white tax, because white people are there's more CEOs in white, there's more white CEOs than black CEOs?
Okay, here's the fundamental differentiation that you need to start recognizing. In a scenario where individuals are oppressed to the such large advantage that men face at the expense of women, will be very happy to tax. In countries where white privilege is something that is so big and all the African Americans are unable to get a job, will be very happy to apply the tax as well. In a country where homosexuals are being discriminated, being killed at the side of the road, will be very happy to apply that tax as well. That's the difference. Let's look at the first contribution. How do we re-educate society to recognize the importance of gender inequality, and what are the benefits that we get? How did this problem materialize, Mr. Speaker? Because male privilege exists in both progressive and non-progressive nations. Individuals get better jobs. The definition of a success within a particular nation state is always attached to the idea of how successful a man is. It's a man's world, right, that we're living in. We think that a historical attachment is always dependent upon the fact that the male economic development is always prioritized. Because biologically, women are not a sound economic development, Mr. Speaker, because they're not strong enough, because they might leave the job when they get a baby, Mr. Speaker. That's a distinction why this privilege exists. But what are the actual benefits that we can accrue? Thank you. Why does state necessarily tax individuals? For two reasons. One, we want to really correct the way in which individuals perceive particular problems. Two, to educate individuals. We think that we want to create a perception in society to want to make men realize that it's not so much a man-hating agenda, that you want to create an actual comprehension within men, that because you were able to get a job as a laborer or as a doctor or as whatever you are, is because you were biologically more advantageous than a female community, Mr. Speaker. We want to recorrect that premise, because more often than not, the kind of oppression that men inflict onto the female community is because society expects them to treat women that way, because society expects them to be the powerful one, because society expects them to not be submissive to the female community, Mr. Speaker. But why is it legitimate for the state to come and do this? Because, thank you, because we think that a fundamental problem of this gender inequality derives from the fact of the state, right? The fact that state enacted policy a long time ago in terms of inculcating this privilege, the fact that only men get to vote, the fact that only men get to have property, the fact that, thank you, when you get a divorce a long time ago, men get the children, not the women, Mr. Speaker. We think that this is when the state has to come and take a strong stance. But we also think, thirdly, that it aids the way in which men participate in the gender fight. Because when you take a hard stance in terms of trying to punish individuals in society or creating that premise that there was something wrong, we think that that's when you create real education. In terms of making people realizing that that's an actual distinctive problem within the rich and the poor in Germany, and making people realizing that being poor or the wage gap or the economic gap is an actual problem. Or reconsidering whether or not alcohol or cigarette is something that's actually harmful to individuals in society. That's how we make people realize the problem, right? We think it's very legitimate for states to intervene, because this is where we want men to be able to participate better, when they understand that it's not so much a man-hating agenda, it's the fact that we were in a position of privilege, irrespective of how nice we were to other women or how nice we were to other men, that we are in an advantageous position just because we have the male genitalia, Mr. Speaker. We also we think that an exclusive benefit that you can derive from this is that A, you get actual supporters of the feminist cause that understands the actual problem, as opposed to jumping the gun and saying that the reason why we participate is because we were mean to you. But B, we also think, especially in developing nations, that there's a lack of severe funding that's redirected to the feminist cause, and we think that this allows the female community to participate economically. But lastly, why do we have to do this now, Mr. Speaker? Because the growth of the feminist movement is changing and shifting to the way in which they want to fight for their cause. It's not so much about the female fight anymore. It's about the fact that there needs to be gender equality all across the spectrum, politically, socially, and economically. We think that we need to re-characterize the way in which we fight for this movement. We think we want to allow for the participation of individuals when they understand the actual problem. If you believe that the fight is real, if you believe that this is something that is a legitimate cause, you should propose.
Thank you, member of government. I invite the member of state government.
This side of the house isn't arguing for taxing males. It's arguing for affirmative action, something that we're okay with. It's arguing for benefiting women. It's arguing that women should receive benefits, are all things we're okay with. But it doesn't tell us why you should tax males, why you should punish males for things that they never did. It doesn't tell you how taking money away from individuals suddenly means that women will benefit. This is something that is a very large thing that we think that they're missing. Let's look at the two issues in this debate. Number one, is it justified to tax individuals, to tax these males? Number two, is it really going to be good for these women in the long term? Firstly, is it justified to tax individuals? Well, they said the first reason is because it fixes a problem. Let's analyze what that problem is, because we think it's clearly not going to solve that problem. The problem was that these women are financially disincentivized. Women aren't financially as good as men are. Then if your problem is finance, then why are you then taxing men? Because we think that in that case, you should do what we do on the status quo and tax and give women advantages based on their capability. Because you have to understand, right? There are a lot of rich women under status quo as well. You have to tell me why they should also benefit from that tax and why those poor men should also be punished under that tax. That's why under the government, where we don't want a blanket policy, we want to specifically target these women who are disadvantaged. That's what we're okay with under our proposals. So we're not solving anything. We don't think so, right? Secondly, we think that the second reason why they wanted to do was because they said, look, these men are the cause of the women's problems. No interviewer comes into an interview and tells, I'm not going to hire a woman to do it because women are stupid. That's absolutely, like, idiots think that, because that means that an interviewer is intentionally like sabotaging his own company. What instead occurs, and what we think is the real actual problem, not necessarily men, but it's because women have been disadvantaged for so long that they're now catching up. So it's not necessarily that men are privileged, but it's that women are catching up. Then does it make sense for us to punish men or to like do we kick down men because women are catching up? We think that doesn't really make sense. We think given enough time, like leveling the playing field by punishing men, we think it's an extremely bad way to go about it because it means that everybody loses out in the long term, right? And instead we do is just punish individuals, right? Thirdly, they said that because male privilege exists, and this is where sorry, let me just be really, really clear here, right? Like, I'm not against affirmative action, I'm just against taxing men, because like my money. But never mind. Let's go on to the next thing, right? Is it good for women? Because they told you that look, men have really a lot of privilege in society. Okay, that might have been true, right? But we don't think that's necessarily true anymore. Like, I believe that men have privilege when I'm not 20 times more likely to die than a woman in a job because males have 20 times more mortality rate than women when working. Like in a fire, I am expected to save the woman and children. I always save the woman and children. Like in a sinking ship, men have to stay behind while the women and children are saved, right? Like women and children are always protected under society to begin with. So we don't understand what male privilege what necessary male privilege you are talking about, right? Like I said, your only problem is that females are disadvantaged. That's something that we're working towards actively. Let's look at the only thing under their stance that actually supported taxing, right? They said they wanted to educate individuals. Why would you want to tax? Why would you want to educate individuals by taxing them? And you're even targeting like the completely wrong one, right? You want to educate women, so therefore you tax men. Like that's the completely wrong group to educate to begin with, right? So they said that look, maybe these women will realize the problem and that's a real social problem. Well, why is that mutually exclusive? Why can't we simply educate women under our proposal and tell them, look, there's a real problem with social products, especially when you consider all of the harms that come into it, that people are more likely to misinterpret and like be more chauvinistic towards women to begin with, right? Let's look at what I'm going to argue today. First of all, I'm going to tell you that this tax is unjustified towards males. And secondly, I'm going to tell you from a female's perspective why it pushes away males and why the males are ultimately important for the women's movement. No, thank you. First, we think it's harmful because it's a blanket policy towards males, right? You're punishing specific individuals for what they haven't done. You're taxing males and then using that money in other affirmative actions. What that ultimately means is that, number one, you do not have to tax to do that, right? Like, you could have simply gotten that money from other income tax. You could have, like, all manner of other things. So it's not actually, like, taxing it by itself doesn't actually do anything. So the second reason why we think it's unjustified is because we think that you're turning a financial problem into a gender problem, and when it's not necessarily a gender problem to begin with, right? Like females who have to take maternity leave, we think that's a gender problem, and we think that we're specifically tackling that under this law. But taxing males turns it into a financial problem because it means that we're not specifically targeting the things that makes it disadvantageous for women to begin with. We think that's extremely harmful. We think the second thing that does before that, yes.
Look, what is the exclusive distinction of your policy? Why is this not affirmative action? Does male privilege even exist?
Because because affirmative action is specific toward the gender differences, right? Like, we help women and we enforce maternity leave because that's something specific to women. But something that's not necessarily specific and something that's so big, like just taxing all men, doesn't really make sense because it's extremely big. We think that we should tackle those gender specific issues because, like, it makes more sense to do so. But number two, right? Like, we think the reason why we should only focus on gender specific issues is because taxing males, taxing males on non-specific gender issues means that we're then taxing people on a blanket policy. We think that's extremely harmful. Let's just go on to my next argument. From the female's perspective, right? We think what it makes women is that it compels women to believe that the women are part, that men are part of the problem instead of the solution, right? And we think it's really important that women believe that men are part of the solution. Why? Number one, it places liability on the men even though they haven't actually done anything. That means that even if a man hasn't caused perpetuation of whatever, or a male has gotten no privilege, a woman is likely to commit acts that are more likely to antagonize males, right? Like, they're more likely to speak out against males, for example. We think this is extremely, like, a bad thing for the women's movement. Like, you need, like, the people who will be interviewing, the people who will, like, the other 50% of the population are males to begin with. That means that you have to have them help you out if you want to also be advantaged in society. Like, all this does is make it so that the females feel more justified towards harming males. And that means that they're more likely to not, they're more likely to undertake actions that will push away males instead of working on the solution together, right? You lose a large chunk of your social support and your ability to push forward policies when you push away males. Let's look at what I talked to you on our proposal, right? Number one, I told you that it doesn't really make sense to tax individuals because it's the wrong solution to the wrong problem. But most importantly, we don't think they actually debated this motion in the spirit of the motion. All they told us was that affirmative action is good. You need to tell us why tax is good. Very proud.
The 10th member of opposition now to close for the government and right to
Mr. Chadwick, more than that, you are immediately given more economic advantage. You're immediately assumed more power, and you're more likely to just get a job. You're less likely to be sexually harassed.
Yeah.
All men who are rich are more advantaged than women of their similar class. We think all of these are created by a societal structure that was perpetuated historically. Something we try to correct, and this is another fundamental process to create a balance between the disadvantage that women face and the advantage that men have. We think it's both principle and practical at the same time. They needed to deal with both differences. OG talked fundamentally about the problem we are facing, the discrimination of women, and why we need to redistribute that money. What we talked about was how societal structure fundamentally exclude women from the power and form economical structure. Like, for example, economics that women participate in, like nurturing children and things like that, are economics that are not considered part of main economies, things that we don't pay women for or don't think as important as the work that men do. This is a power redistribution problem that has existed and a continuous disadvantage that women face. So this is something that they refuse to deal with as well. So this is something that across the board, all women will suffer because of their biological problem, biological structure, and how society operates on them. Now let's talk about what Jay talked about and what they didn't deal with. So this is a characterization and something that Sharif missed from Jay's speech. Because we told you that taxing is an effective way to socially engineer society. We point you to the example of syntax as well as the rich and poor gap in Germany. At Germany, we told you that the rich and poor gap is something that they take very seriously. Anybody who's pay above like $1 million would have to be taxed a lot more compared to a person at a lower bracket of pay. What happens is that it creates a reconsideration in how we evaluate the gap between the rich and poor. It also creates a reconsideration in how we evaluate whether or not you should drink certain alcoholic beverage or things like that. Tax is very fundamental because it affects everybody and forces everyone to reconsider why we are acting a certain way and what we should do to correct that particular problem. What it does in this particular case is make men realize that every advantage they have, and at every point of your life, success is defined as a successful man rather than a successful woman. As a poor person, men are more likely to get a job compared to a woman because the labor that a woman can offer is considered less important to the hard labor that men can offer. So at every stage of life, you are more advantaged than a female. Everything and every male should recognize that. No, thank you. So this is also something that Jay said that wasn't particularly responded to. She said that across the board, women are disadvantaged, whether in progressive society or extremely cultural society. That means that what they have to sacrifice in order to enter this economic structure as entirely patriarchal is a lot more compared to what a man has to sacrifice to enter the economic structure. This is something that Charlie didn't respond to in his speech. Because what he said was that it's unjustified because it's a blanket policy. We say it's justified because to enter even economic structure or the power structure, a woman has to sacrifice a lot more of herself and give up a lot more of her personality compared to a man. There's a lot more things that she has to prove against compared to what a man has to prove against. Closing.
Okay, look, given the fact that, like in Germany, they give that tax because individuals are well aware of it, not the other way around. It's not that they want to make individuals more aware of it, therefore they give that tax, but because individuals are already aware of it, that's why they have big social pressure. So you're getting, like, they don't need to social engineer.
I can't believe you used an example in a PI, but never mind. The point is this: in Germany, after the tax was introduced, that's when the gap between the poor and the rich was something that people reconsidered a lot more. That's when more progressive policies was attempted after that first initial policy. We don't understand why that's a problem, right? So furthermore, this is what closing opposition wanted to talk about. They say that now female will see men as a problem, and that female will speak up a lot more against men. Firstly, we don't think it's a problem if more women are starting to have a lot more opinions about the different advantage and the different disadvantage that men and women suffer. We think this creates a lot more discussion about what men has and what women doesn't have, or the converse. And we think this discussion is very healthy, and we don't think why it's bad. And we don't think that women will see men largely as a problem, but see the structure in which either men operate or how society operates as the problem. And we think seeing that structural problem is something that's extremely fundamental to how we operate this policy. No, thank you. So what are the other issues in this debate? What we also say is that we need men to understand the different advantage and the things that they, as opposed to their attitude now. Their attitude of a lot of men now is to dismiss the fact that they have an advantage, or having a disregard to all the fundamental advantage that they have. They think it's not consequential or something that's not existent. We tell them that all these advantages are something that are very real, that every man needs to recognize exists. And we think this policy pushes for better acceptance of this. No, thank you. So we also already dealt with opening opposition. So Jay already pointed out to you that there are no clear principles that opening opposition rely on. And we think this was equitable to what closing opposition has. Because both of them fundamentally wanted affirmative action for women, more targeted policy. But they don't want at the same time to punish men. but not recognizing that affirmative action also put men at a certain disadvantage. So we don't see a principal opposition to that. But furthermore, we see that other alternatives don't directly deal with the inherent imbalance between men and women. They deal with specific things. Like, for example, the Equal Pay Act only guarantees that both men and women who are already working get equal pay, but not dealing with the fact that it's very hard for a lot of women to enter certain jobs or to get work and things like that. So even targeted policies are not entirely dealing with the imbalance. We think our policy deal with it better. But it also means that effectively dealing with open opposition, that men under their side will be angry anyway because all your alternatives exist. That chauvinist men will be angry at your policies anyway. But we do it regardless because we think social policy does change perception. Sure, at the start there'll be a shock and initial, later on it becomes more acceptance towards that policy. Because as society progresses and you understand the benefits of those policies, then we think the society will be like able to accept that. That's why backlash isn't a legitimate argument against policies, against socially progressive policies. So we think that if you understand that men are severely advantaged, and if that advantage needs to be dealt with, you must propose.
Thank you, Dr. This round and
Before going on to my two issues, let us go on to this favorite example given by them, which is the German progressive tax. Now, the difference between the German progressive tax and also the male-only tax is this: that the difference between the rich and the poor, that they don't have any equal ground, whereby the rich benefits too many from the government and the society, but the poor are at a very disadvantage. And we cannot create that equal ground. But in the male and female situation, both have equal access to whatever the government is giving up there. But even if they don't have equal access, you can always create it. You can always give equal pay to men and women, but you can't give equal pay to rich people and poor people. That's why we believe that taxing male just because that the male are at an advantage compared to women is not justified. Now I'm going to go on to two issues, which is why do we even tax, and is it justified to tax male? And second of all, will it help women when we tax male? Firstly, they wanted to argue that, look, sit down. I just started. Look, we want to tax male in order to compensate for all those disadvantages that the female get, like 40% of CEOs are only 40% CEOs are women, and men get 20% more pay than women, and all those stuff. Look, first thing first, you don't tax people because you want to compensate for others. For example, you don't tax current South African society just because of their apartheid. No, we don't do that. We don't punish those people who don't wrong other people. We punish people because people wrong. In this sense, the male don't wrong women at all. What they do is that they work at an equal playing field with women. Now, when you want to say that women are at a disadvantage, you help women, not bring down male. Second response to this, is this. Sit down. Second response is this. It is unfair to tax. It is unfair to tax people based on birth lottery, why and place a blanket policy there, because these people never actually choose to be male or to be female. They suddenly appear as male. Same as how we don't tax white people and black people, because these people appear as white or these people suddenly appear as black. We believe a blanket policy to punish people for those things that they never really consent to being is actually unfair. But then again, right, why do we even tax people? From side opposition, we believe that we tax people based on the benefit they receive from the government. For example, service tax, and also progressive tax. We believe, like in progressive tax nature, because the male gains more benefit from the government because they can access more government benefit privileges compared to the poor people. Therefore, we tax them even more than those people who are low in the land. But then again, the difference here is that between a male and a female, these people get the equal opportunity to go into working area, working force. These people get equal education.
if you want to argue that these people don't really get that equal, you can always make people play field. Like for example, give affirmative action to women, which I will explain later. They must have an issue, but sit down. but you need to understand this. Like you don't punish people for and then the second thing they wanted to argue is that look, male have history prioritize male even more. Society expect male to be on top of women whatsoever. Look, yes, we don't look, you don't punish people based on historical narratives. You don't impose tax based on historical narrative and such. The way to do this is that you give this helping hand to women. For example, like the example of like how before this only men can vote and such thing. Yes, we do, but then again, we don't tax men because they can vote. We give the voting right to women. We believe it's not justified for us to tax men in such sense. Before going on to the second issue, yes.
So 86. Yes. Hopefully. 86% of CEOs in charge of promoting people are men. Can we then blame them for the inability of women to climb the corporate ladder?
Look, you need to understand that even if you tax people, the women won't even get into working force. What you need is to actively put women into the CEO's chairs. And taxing people don't do that. But even if you want to say that, it will progress slowly and such things, you never showed us the link. That's the logical leap you provided us. How am I supposed to rebut that? Sit down. Second issue. Why you second issue, sorry, will it help women? Because they wanted to argue that when we get this money, what happens that we can subsidize these people, subsidize education and such things in order to elevate women, in the social strata. No, this is a problem solution mismatch. Because why? How does tax even help women to get more education? How does tax even get women more jobs? You need to understand that like even if you want to say subsidize things, these things are already equal in currency. So we don't understand it. But even if, right, sit down, you said that even if it may increase a bit, it is still not justified for us to punish these people when they did nothing wrong. For example, like why don't you then ask white people to pay more for their education than blacks? We don't do that because it's unjustified. But more on, right? Like what happens then is that you focus this hatred more towards the women. Because why? Because you need to understand, compared to affirmative action, taxation is destructive in nature. It takes away things from you compared to putting things in the right place. You believe they are destroying we believe whatever they do is that they destroy things rather than putting things in place. But even if, right, you wanted to argue like, look, affirmative action also takes away men's space and all this stuff. We believe it's different here because if you want to because then taxation is also taken away. But thing is, if you want society to realize that women are at a disadvantage and men at a disadvantage, you don't tax people. What you do is you educate them. They have so many logical leaps. They never actually clarify to us how tax equals to realization, how tax equals to more women empowerment and all those stuff. We take this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, both members of the House and the Cross.